In this lecture, we're going to really drive the point home that the three-way comparison operator combined with the equals operator in C++20 really simplify the job you have to do to set up and maintain your logical operators. Suppose we want to support the operations like this. We have a type called number, and we have two objects of that. We have n1 and n2, and this is going to be wrapping around an integer. So we would want to compare our objects for our class, but we also want to support comparing to direct ants, because some people might want to do this kind of comparison because our type is really wrapping around an integer. It's really like an integer, but we might want to do some other operations in our type. But it is still possible that some people are going to desire to be able to do something like this and pass a literal on the left or on the right, and we want to support this. Here is a possible implementation for our number class. It is going to be wrapping around an integer, but one thing that should be noted here is that the constructor is marked explicit to prevent implicit conversions from int to our type using this constructor here. So if we want to support all the operators we saw in the previous slide, we have no choice but to do all these 18 operators in our C++ class. I know some of you might be thinking, this is really crazy. Why would I want to do that? This is a common requirement to want to compare fundamental types with our own type and really do this kind of comparison here. And sometimes you need something like this. And if you need this, you're going to have to do all these operators, and this is really crazy. And some of you must be asking again, couldn't we do this as members and maybe simplify things a little bit? Well, I hate to break it to you, that's not going to work either, because we want the possibility to have an integer as the left operand. Remember, if you do your operator as a member, the first operand has to be an object of your type. And if we do that as a member, we will lose the ability to pass an integer as the left operand here. That's why we are doing all these as non-member freestanding global functions. So we need 18 functions to support all these operations, and this is really crazy. But with C++20, we can bring this number down to only 4 functions, and we will have the flexibility to do them as member functions. And this is really cool. We are going to do the first three-way comparison operator as a default one because we really are going to be comparing this member variable member-wise. So we should really default to this to take advantage of the code that the compiler is going to generate for us. And we are going to be setting up another three-way comparison operator to compare with int. So the left operand is going to be our object, and we will be comparing with an integer, which is going to be the second operand. We're going to replicate the same thing for the equals operator. We're going to be comparing with the number that we have to the right, and we're going to be doing the comparison here, and we're going to also do an equals operator, which is going to compare with an integer here, and this is going to work just fine. Hopefully you can see that we have brought the number down from 18 to 4, and the code we have here is going to still work through the magic of rewriting the operators, and the compiler is going to be doing all this magic to make this work. Now that you know this, we're going to go to Visual Studio Code and see this in action. Okay, so here we are in our working folder. The current project is Logical Operators Simplified. We're going to see how we can simplify these things. We can grab the code from the last lecture. I don't think we can use this. We're going to grab our template files. That's going to be our starting point here. This is going to work just fine. And we're going to put them in place. And we are going to grab this thing and open this in Visual Studio Code by dragging and dropping here. This is going to give us our main CPP file. We can clean it up a little bit. And we're going to set up our number class that we're going to be using here. We're going to put in the number header file .h, and we're going to put in a CPP file for this. We're going to say number.cpp, and this is going to do. I am going to grab the code I have lying around on my drive, and we're going to be reusing this in this lecture here. And you see that I have all these crazy operators commented down. And we are going to hop over to the CPP file and also put in the code. Nothing really complicated. The class is going to be wrapping around an integer, and it's going to be providing a few member variables to manipulate that integer. We have a getWrappedInt method, which is going to return that int. We have a bunch of constructors. We really only have one that is going to work. The default one is going to be deleted, but this is going to work. What we want to see is what we would need to do to set up a bunch of operators that even support implicit conversions. So we are going to include our number class. Let's do that. And the code we want to work is something like this. We want to be able to set up two number objects, 10 and 20, and we want to be able to compare them in all kinds of crazy ways. We want to be able to compare direct objects. We also want the flexibility to compare with the literals both on the left and on the right. If you are not using the features from C++20 that we have already learned about, let's comment out our equals and three-way comparison operators to really see this and show you the amount of work you would need to do to get this to work. You would need to uncomment all these 18 member functions. They are not member functions, they are freestanding global functions. So you would need to do all these things. And by the way, if you don't want to type all this, and I wouldn't really recommend doing that, you just need to understand the behavior of these functions and member functions that we are doing here. You can grab the code from the resource section of this lecture, and you're going to be able to download all the code here and reuse that. That's going to save you a few minutes, if not hours. Why not? So we have our functions here, and we're going to go back in the CPP file and comment out. We're not going to comment out anything. We are just going to uncomment our functions. And you're going to see that this is super crazy. We have a lot of functions that we're going to maintain that really do a seemingly simple task to allow us to do comparisons. So let's build and see that this is going to work. We're going to build with GCC. The build is going to be good. Our functions are working because we are doing them as non-members, and we were careful in putting in all the overloads that allow us to compare with literals both from the left and from the right. So we can simplify this, but before we do, let's try to run the program and see that it actually works to our specifications. And let's go up and see what we get. N1 has a 10, N2 has a 20, and N1 greater than N2. This is returning true. This is not right. This is not right. Let's go back and see what we are doing. Let's look at our greater than operator, and let's look at the implementation of that. We are flipping things around. This is a typo I did. We should compare what we have on the left with what we have to the right. Let's do right operand here, and let's make sure we are doing the same thing with all the operators that we have in here. And for less than or equal, we also have the same problem. Let's do left operand and do right operand here. Let's go down and see and really make sure we don't have any other boo-boos in. You can see that these operators can really mess your brain up. You have a lot of things to do for a seemingly simple task to compare things in the main function, and this is really bad. Let's try and build again. Let's make sure we have the main CPP file selected. We can run this task to build with GCC. Hopefully now we're going to get this right. We're going to clear, the build is good, and we're going to run Rooster. And now we have our output here, N1 greater than N2, that's false. 15 greater than N2, that's false. N1 greater than 25, that's also false. And you can check all these relationships, and you're going to see that we have the output that we expect. But again, we have too many functions we have to maintain, and this is really bad. We can simplify this using the features from C++20 and let the compiler really generate all the other things, and all we have to do is put in 4 operators. Let's comment out all this craziness that we had, and we are going to bring this in our block comment here. We're going to go back in our CPP file and also uncomment all this, or comment all this. We want this to be disabled because this is no longer recommended in C++20, and we are going to enable our C++20 magic here. We're going to have a three-way comparison operator, which is going to be comparing two number objects. And we're going to have a three-way comparison operator, which is going to be comparing a number object we have on the left to an integer parameter that we have to the right. But the compiler has the flexibility to really flip things around and make this work, even if we pass an integer either from the left or from the right. And this is really cool. We also have an equals operator, which is going to compare things. The first one is going to be working on two number objects. The second one is going to compare a number object we have on the left to an integer that we have on the right. And look at what we have in the main CPP file. This code we had using all these 18 functions is working now. And this is really cool. Implicit conversions are going to kick in. The compiler is going to rewrite whatever it needs to rewrite to get our logical operation to work. And we have the flexibility of setting up our operators as member functions. And this is super cool. Let's try and build the program to make sure it works. The build is good. We can clear and run Rooster. And you see that we have the same results we had before. And this is really cool. Hopefully you can see that the three-way comparison operator coupled with the equals operator that you have to also overload sometimes. These two things are going to make your life easier in terms of the operators. If we consider the number of operators you have to overload to make things work, especially if you need implicit conversions from fundamental types to your type. This is really all I had to share in this lecture. I hope you found it interesting. In the next one, I am going to show you that sometimes you may need to set up your three-way comparison operator as a freestanding non-member global function. But in more than 90% of the cases, you will do that as a member function, and the compiler is going to kick in and do all the rewrite rules it needs to do to get things to work. But sometimes, in really, really rare cases, you may need to do that as a freestanding non-member global function, and we're going to see that in the next lecture. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.